the efforts, the program, project, the response of above and below ground animal communities. So, and as we know, the tropical rainforests are some of the most biodiverse and ecologically significant ecosystem on our planet. And they play a critical role in regulating the global climate, providing a habitat for countless species and sustaining the livelihoods of many communities. However, these vital ecosystems are under threat due to various anthropogenic factors, including change, climate change, habitat fragmentation, also the US as we update the forest fires that are still undergoing in some of the provinces in Indonesia. So I think from Professor through research and not only sheds light on the challenges faced by tropical rainforest, but also offers innovative solution and the deeper understanding of the intricate relationship between the animals and that inhabit these environments both above and below Earth. His work has the potential to inform conservation efforts and shape policies aimed at preserving these invaluable ecosystems for the future generations. Here I invite all of you participants to contribute in this expert talk, and we are so welcome with the questions. I think we will have a discussion, so we can open the possibility for the future collaborations. I think that's for me. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Anand, for the opening remarks. So before we start the talk, I would like to briefly tell you our guest today. So please, Pak, if you help me with the website. So Professor Stefan Scheu is the professor at the Animal Ecology Working Group of University of Göttingen. So he's a very prominent professor dealing with, there are several topics that he's been working on and very expertise on it, like structure of soil food webs, and then the relationships between the below and above ground system of terrestrial ecosystem that we are going to talk about today, and also another topic related to parthenogenesis in soil, which is very interesting part. I know I'm a plant people, so for me parthenogenesis is interesting because plants can produce seeds without pollen. Maybe what happened with that with animals is going to be very interesting topic. If you maybe want to have like study or research on that, we can talk later on with Professor Stefan Scheu. And he will be discussing again with related to the efforts project, CRC 1990. I was part of that project back in 2013 and 2015. I was a master student at the University of Göttingen under Professor Dr. Prof. PO6 at that time, and still in a good contact with Professor Dr. Prof. and hope to seek any future collaborations as well. So it will be good if the presence of Professor Stefan Scheu here also can initiate further collaborations between the Center for Ecology and Ecology and also University of Göttingen and also other peers here like IPB and also University of Jambi and also University of Tadulako, who I didn't tell. And so to make it short, I would like to give the floor to Professor Stefan Scheu. Please, Professor.
Yeah, good morning or almost evening. As mentioned, it's a great pleasure to be here and that I can present some of the results of the last kind of 20 years, but also introduce you in the first place into the project, because I assume that everyone is familiar with. So what I will do actually is start off with a bit of an overview of the project, as the kind of also the title suggests, so the efforts project, and then as I'm an animal ecologist, as you have heard, and I was responsible for studying the animal communities in the efforts project, I will introduce you to some of the major results of that project in the second part of the talk. So the ones who were with us early on, like Pak Bambang or Ibu Kayan, Iskander, they may remember the time, but almost 50 years back when we went to the field. And first of all, we identified the topics that we are going to work on, and then we had to identify field sites. So we were traveling through Germany. We had some intensive times in finding the places where we are going to establish our field plots and investigate this transformation from rainforest into plantation systems. And then the very critical thing was in 2012, 2011 actually, when the DFG came with a panel to Jambi, and they evaluated us and the proposal we handed in. This was quite a crowd of people, as you can see. We had but or even more than 10 cars. We were driving through Jambi and presenting them what we aimed to do in the next kind of 12 years. Now this is almost coming to an end. Then we had kickoff meetings, official meetings, starting in 2012 in Jambi. In 2016, when we had a prolongation phase, and then we had a second prolongation phase. This is how the CRC works. So the project is re-evaluated at a regular interval of 3 years. And actually, the secondary evaluation was in 2019. But we, of course, couldn't have a kickoff meeting because this was Corona time. And then we postponed it to have a retreat in 40,000. So quite a few, close to 13, were with us. And you can see the whole crowd of people, more than 70 visitors from Indonesia, and there are about 150 people. So this is all the also retreats we had in between, gathering and presenting our results. We established a project, and this is, of course, based on infrastructure. We had a lot of infrastructure. I'm not introducing that in detail, but we are very grateful also, of course, to the University of Jambi. They helped in providing us housing, building, and laboratory facilities. And then we built field hubs with some companies like Hubusego, where we established a large experiment I will talk later about, and with Reiki, you may know restoration ecosystem, Restaurati. We also built hubs there for being able to do our field work. We set up kind of experiments which by now are quite actually well known. This is our so-called biodiversity enrichment experiment, where we actually managed to convince companies that will allow us to cut oil palms. This was a very critical thing. Initially, none of the companies kind of agreed about, but in the end, I think, as I also mentioned later, it was not too much a burden for the companies. So this was the initial kind of setup of the seedlings, and by now, actually, the experiment is extremely well established, and seedling plants are now overtopping the oil palms and so on. So this is a very now well-known experiment. Let's not go further. Can we do that? I will. You will do it. Okay, so we go to the next. Now to the topic. As Consil already introduced, of course, transformation of rainforest is a major topic, not only nationally, it's a hot topic internationally. It's because these transformation processes are going on very fast, and as you know, this is also the case in Indonesia, and in particular Sumatra, and this transformation may threat biodiversity and major ecosystem functions. But on the other side, it may also actually offer opportunities for the future, for basically setting up landscapes which help to mitigate conflicts between conservation and economic development. So the major kind of aim of the whole project was to establish knowledge on ecological and socio-economic functions and trade-offs in tropical lowlands to protect and enhance both ecological functions and human welfare, contributing to reconcile conservation and human needs. And we decided to set that program up in the lowland rainforest of Jambi province. Well, we did that because the lowland rainforest in Sumatra was declining kind of dramatically in the last 40 years. And today, the lowland rainforest is virtually vanished, except for conservation areas such as the Bukit Bintang National Park or Harapan Rainforest Conservation Area. And this is mostly replaced by a massive expansion of oil palm, as you all know, and the integration into the world markets. Overall, we identified this region as being ideally suited for investigating major current and future conservation versus human needs conflicts. So again, the research area, and we divided that actually into basically two landscapes, what we call Bukit Bintang landscape and Harapan Rainforest landscape. Some important issues were there that we had kind of matching between ecological and socio-economic boundaries. So lowland rainforest has a kind of ecological definition on one side, but also the socio-economic boundaries are set by an area where oil is cultivated. And we, from the beginning, wanted, of course, to integrate ecological and socio-economic studies. This is a unique feature of a project like this. This from German side, of course, essential for reaching the goals of the whole project. And we integrated experiments. And in these two regions, we actually set up a well-organized experimental design, a replicated design. This is basically mandatory for a basic science project aiming at publishing the results in scientific journals. So we need publications, we need to do statistical analysis and things like that. Without that, we would end up in prestigious journals being recognized internationally as an important project. So what we did initially is we focused on 4 land use systems, lowland rainforest, and 3 transformation systems, jungle rubber, agroforest system with rubber, and then monoculture plantations of rubber. We looked into environmental, ecological, and social impacts associated with these transformation processes, and we aimed at identifying measures for improvement and strategies to implement then sustainable land use systems in the future. But all that was only possible because we had this close collaboration with universities from the beginning, and all this establishment was based initially on the close collaboration between Göttingen and IPB, but also Tabulaku University, and then, of course, integrating Jambi University. Then we have national level partnerships and field level partnerships. Our local farmers being of eminent importance, but also our companies and national parks, which form the basis for all the work we've done. The collaboration is based on about 70 partners, collaborations, counterparts from Indonesia. We had a lot of activities in the last years with lectures and workshops, retreats, as I was briefly introducing. And as also already mentioned by Ibu Ayan initially, is that we implemented in the framework of CBD regulations, access and benefit sharing system, where we funded local projects, early career support, capacity building workshops. We also supported herbarium and built up field stations in Ukraine, for example. The project actually was recognized as best practice CBD, and in terms of CBD and US regulations by the state Ministry of Research and Technology and Higher Education in Indonesia, but also internationally. Actually, it was recognized in the follow-up meeting, 10-year celebration of the Nagoya Protocol. It was recognized as one of the 20 best practice cases in respect to CBD regulations and ABS measures. There are a lot of social activities associated with that, also contributing to this best practice recognition. We had activities of partners and official visits. For example, the symposium towards Indonesian sustainable oil palm in 2017, hosted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We actually also had visits by the, at that time, Chancellor of Germany, Mrs. Merkel. We had the visitors of the Presidential Board of the University of Göttingen. Well, this all contributed to recognition, and overall, if you got the last figures here, but in total, the project also spent on these 160 research projects and capacity building workshops and scholarships, more than €1 million. This is the output, the project from the German Science Foundation perspective, of course, is judged by its output in international journals, and you can see that this actually continuously kind of rising. By now, we do have more than 400 papers published in journals, but more than 80% in peer-reviewed journals, and some very prestigious ones in the last time. In part, mostly, of course, disciplinary, but as you can see, it's all interdisciplinary publications are rising, and you may also see that we have a high number of publications with Indonesian counterparts as first authors. Yeah, also, Ian was mentioning that we have a number of German postdoctoral researchers and PhDs, but we have also a large number of Indonesian PhD students. Again, this is not the most recent figure, I'm sorry. Now, I will come to, after this introduction to the CFC, I'd like to come to some major findings. And this is the 3 phases I was mentioning. So this, we were successful in kind of these renewals for 2 times, and were basically allowed to go on for 12 years. This is rather unique long-term projects. Actually, funding schemes like that virtually only exist in Germany at the moment. It's actually at least in the basic science, First of all, briefly to one of the things many people are kind of concerned about, and this is carbon storage, the changes basically in carbon stored in ecosystems. And what you can see is, as of course to be expected, is that much of the carbon in rainforests is stored in the biomass, in the living biomass of the trees. And if these forests are transformed, of course, this is dramatically declining. And another thing to be recognized is the below ground components, living and dead, so we have roots, but also soil organic matter. And as you can see, this is also declining with the transformation to oil palm. At the below ground system, the decline is not as dramatic. Now, if you calculate basically the net primary production of the vegetation, of course, is somehow related to the stored biomass, but not directly. You can also see, if we set that, a rainforest is, of course, much higher than in the other systems, and this is here the change. So we have a decline by 20% to jungle rubber, by 50% to rubber plantations. And actually, in oil palm, of course, it's a bit more tricky because we have an export of the fruit bunches. Yeah? And this is so the primary production actually is very high, of course, in oil palm due to the fertilization. So it's actually even the total net primary production may be higher than rainforest, but most of that, of course, about 60% is exported from the field. So what is remaining on field, so this is what is called here net primary production of the ecosystem, is also quite strong decline compared to the rainforest situation. So in fact, we do have a loss of basically stored carbon and also of net primary production on site due to these transformation processes. One thing which we were very much interested in, of course, is to what extent do all these diversity of different groups of animals, plants, and microbes change. And what you can see here is kind of a 14 groups perspective, including all what I was mentioning, from microbes to birds, and how they respond to this transformation. And what is plotted here is actually the dependency from the profit of the land. So basically revenue, and this is then plotted against species richness. And in most of the cases, you see kind of a linear decline. In many groups, this decline from rainforest to rubber and oil palm is between 50 and 60%. But nevertheless, there is something like 40 to up to 50% of the fauna kind of remain, even in oil palm plantations. But there also are some groups where this decline is less pronounced. It's in particular down here, or when actually the local diversity even increase. And this is in particular in soil microbes. So there is a trade-off, and this is rather universal between basically income, profit, and biodiversity. Although it's non-linear and it's not perfectly universal in soil, it appears to be less pronounced than in the above-ground world. And this is also reflected here. This is what we call beta diversity, so it's a diversity measure between plots in the landscape, basically. So we see here the species loss and the species gain, and well, you see most of the groups, actually there is a species loss, except for some microbial groups down here, or protists, so it's close to be no loss. And then another thing which we looked into is to what extent is the transformation of the land resulting in a more homogeneous constitution of the animal and plant groups, microbial groups, or is it contributing to a more heterogeneous distribution of these animals and plants? And you can see, actually, this is not uniform at all. So there is, and this is what one would have expected, in most of the groups, a more homogeneous distribution. But in fact, in many of the small insect, also arachnid groups, we also have heterogenization. So the species get more heterogeneously distributed in the landscape. But this, of course, is from an overall perspective of the landscape a very important perspective. And then, in particular, kind of my group was investigating, was interested in food webs. This is just to introduce the perspective. So what we wanted to look into is the above ground kind of world, or the above ground diversity, and also the kind of below ground world, or the below ground creatures, which is very rarely done because this is typically a bit more demanding. And this is already a summarizing figure, but I'm going into that a bit later, come back to that a bit later. So to look into the above ground fauna, what we did is actually employed canopy fogging, so blowing insecticide into the canopies of the trees, and then the insects and arachnids are kind of tranquilized and they fall down into traps, and you can see the traps arranged here, and then in the traps we can look into in a semi-quantitative way how many insects are really on a square meter basis and falling down. This is certainly not perfectly quantitative, but you get an idea about really quantities on an area basis. And we did similar things in soil. So this is just an overview of what is falling down from these trees. This is the top groups, and you can see the top group is insects, it's Hymenoptera, so the wasps and bees and so on. And ants, of course, this makes up roughly 1/4 of all the animals which drop down in terms of numbers. Then we have the termites being also very abundant. But then we have groups which typically are kind of not recognized, ignored. This is actually springtails, and I guess no one of you have ever seen one, despite they are everywhere. Also in the canopy of trees, but they are traditionally considered soil groups, soil animals. So, for instance, is also a small insect group, which also is actually not a herbivore group. It's animals which feed on mosses and algae and things like that. And then it's only that we come to groups which predominantly are living as herbivores, like the beetles, or also the true bugs, the hemipterans, and then also predators, like the spiders. And the focus of the project was to look in more detail into all of these groups. So we looked into the most abundant animals, and this is based on all the collections in 2013, and we're still working on these collections from 2013. And the animals I brought today are mainly from that sample in 2013. So in ants, for example, we had in the collections more than 70,000 individuals. We identified them to, actually by now, it's more than 200 more species. And we implemented also DNA barcoding for getting genetic markers for the individual species. We're on the way to do similar things with wasps and bees. And we also do similar things with the springtail. So with all these most abundant hosting groups. Now what I'd like to go on with is kind of summarizing findings. Summarizing meaning the calculation of their functions. And for that, we adopted a biomass and energy flux perspective. So we not only counted them, but then we measured them also, and we calculated the biomass. And what you can see is kind of here the changes in the biomass distribution from rainforest to oil palm. And you can see, of course, what you would expect is that the rainforest stands out. So the size of the pie is reflecting the total biomass, and you can see it declines dramatically, especially actually in rubber plantations. It's very low. Also low in oil palm plantations, but you can also actually recognize is that the composition of the fauna is changing quite heavily. So the orange one, for example, is the spiders, and so the predators up in the canopy. And you can see actually in rubber, their contribution, their relative contribution is exceptionally high. We have a lot of predators from the biomass perspective. On the other hand, in oil palm, actually, the situation is that we have a much less contribution of the predators, but a much higher contribution of the herbivores. So oil palm is basically somewhat characterized by a dominance of plant-feeding insects. This, of course, has consequences for herbivory and pest species. So As you can see here, this is the basis of these below ground food webs. It's on the one side, it's detritus, on the other side, maybe also living plants, roots, which they may consume, and then you have the energy fluxes to higher trophic levels, like top predators like the spiders or also ants. Now, what you can see here in the first place is the comparison between rainforest and oil palm. And you can see that actually the flux of energy to these different trophic levels, so basal trophic levels and higher trophic levels, is rather, let's say, similar in rainforest. So we have high, of course, bases. Most of the energy is processed in this detritivore level, but also very high level is processed in the predator level. If we look into oil palm, we'll see that there is a huge processing of energy in the detritivore food web. But there is virtually nothing which is transported, which is propagating into the predator level. And now an interesting thing is this processing of energy in oil palm is actually due to this component. You can see this is the that's actually more than 90%. And this is actually this compartment here. It's actually this is few species of invasive earthworms which colonize these oil palm plantations. And they dominate the system very much, and they are responsible for basically the processing of energy in the detrital system in oil palm plantations. This is also somewhat kind of scary because this is invasive species and it's very few species. Basically, it's one species, which is probably not native to Indonesia, but introduced, and they are responsible for most of the energy transfer in oil palm. This is kind of summarizing kind of this overall picture again. Now, based on really energy perspectives, well, I'm going to skip that. Now, actually, a figure I wanted to show initially, because this is now some major results from the socio-economic perspective, socio-economic panels, which have been done in Jambi, have clearly showing that adoption of oil is beneficial. It's generally beneficial from the perspective of oil palm cultivation, increasing household consumption and expenditure. It also improves household diet and nutrition, and it reduces actually poverty rates in a very wide setting of different types of villages. Now, coming to a bit the mitigation perspective. We see there is definitely a conflict between biodiversity and economics and human welfare, but there is perspectives, and one of the main experiments which provide these perspectives is the biodiversity enrichment experiment, which I already introduced, which you basically see here. And by now, Abama will agree, this experiment provided really promising perspectives for the future in also large, basically on large scales, because what we see is, despite we cut about 40% of the oil palm, actually oil palm yield and revenue even increase because of the remaining trees compensating for the reduction in basically the tree canopy coverage. So on the one side, basically the socioeconomic perspective is rather promising. With reduced coverage of oil palm, we can basically come up with a similar yield and revenue. And on the other side, looking into the diversity, it was clear rather quick that we have a large increase in diversity across many groups of actually plants and also animals. But a similar thing, which we established in another experiment, is our so-called oil palm management experiment, the efforts OPMX, where we looked into potential changes in two major management practices, and this is fertilizer input and herbicide treatment. So instead of using chemical herbicides, we used mechanical herbicide treatment, and actually the fertilizer we simply did not fertilize plots. So this is what you can see here. So the fertilized plots, the non-fertilized plots. And what you can see is that the plots where we had mechanical herbicide treatment and we added fertilizer, of course, there the yield is maximized, but also where basically we omitted the fertilization for years, 4 years, the oil palm production was only little reduced. So if you calculate actually then gross profit proportion of the revenues, this treatment actually is maximizing revenue. So with mechanical herbicide treatment and 4 years not fertilizing at all. Now, with the current phase, we promised to scale up our findings to the landscape, and for this we implemented what we call a landscape assessment. So we investigated more than 100 plots all across the landscape of Jambi, and we integrated a number of methods, so ground methods, but also remote sensing methods, to be able to scale up the findings. Not going into any details, I can't actually, because this is ongoing work. This is what we want to also continue in the next years, as also briefly mentioned. So although the CRC is running out by 2023, we do have basically first commitment by the DFG, first information by the DFG that we may go on with a limited set of projects for another 3 years. Then, well, hopefully we even can go on beyond with a new CRC, which is currently implemented. It's also mentioned by UIA. Now, the current phase also has the major aim in synthesizing the work. So we have a lot of synthesis projects, and it's actually very successful ongoing work. A number of publications in really the highest standard publications like Nature are coming out, came out. So this is a very successful enterprise. So this brings me to the conclusion. So combining biodiversity and socioeconomic approaches allow to identify strategies for improving both human welfare, but also biodiversity and ecosystem functioning. And integrated analysis of above and below ground systems are needed for developing conservation strategies, considering both biodiversity and ecosystem functioning. And what I think is also an important message from the project is that the below ground system deserves much more attention in developing such strategies. So looking back to this kind of 12 years from my perspective, I'm kind of proud to say that integrated projects like efforts really provide a perspective for mitigating biodiversity and human welfare. So we succeeded in what we aimed at doing in this 12 years, and this is of course something very satisfying. Well, this is again a picture from the 2022 retreat last year in Wolfenhausen. Everybody So I was very happy to come together again and celebrate basically what has been achieved in our project. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Professor Stefan Scheu. We have about 50 participants online and also around 20 participants here in the room. So if you have any questions or comments to Professor Scheu, please, we are very welcome with that. Or is there any from the audience in this room or in the Zoom meeting? Well, while waiting for the comments or questions, I have said nice to read several nice statistics to me because the project has been last for about 10 years already, yeah, from 2012 up to 2011. 11 years, and there are like 404 papers, so almost like 30 papers per year, very high achievements, and about 28 scholarships for PhDs and masters. It's tremendously equipped projects, and about 25 out of those papers, 400 something papers, about 25% first award by Indonesians. So this is very nice. That makes sense why it's one of considered as the good best practice of collaboration. So it's very nice statistic as well. And to me, I have two questions. The first question is related to the first slide that related to how did you convince the company at the beginning? So they allow you to, for everything, yeah, for all these collaborations projects to cut down the oil palm, did you kind of pay some rents to them or you borrow or something, or it's just for free? Because to me, it's a nice example of projects, experimental plot design, ecological plot design in the fields across transformation systems, but mostly technically it's difficult, very difficult, especially how did you convince the company?
Yeah, as I mentioned, this was indeed a very tricky enterprise. It took quite a long time. I think it was more than 2 years until we really solved kind of this problem. So we had this goal rather initial early on, but several companies which we visited, they were actually not at all interested in the end. And then with the help of our counterparts and this approaching several small companies, then it in the end worked. Maybe Paramba or IM can also mention or add some words about it. Well, compensation, also indeed we do some compensation, but it's on a moderate level.
Thank you. Well, I think this is most likely everybody knows when you're a good person with good people, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But indeed, of course, not all of the company in the beginning would like to join the project. So the selections are taking times, and we have a group. Also, Pak is here. Pak Mangirawan is also part of the group to approach, and we never pay any cent to like basics. So we do the total offer there. No compensation at all in terms of cash money, and also no capacity development. But what we have is like we consistent with the agreement that we have to pass the data that we collected. And second, of course, we build regularity. And for the Humosindo, is also PT Humosindo Makmur Sejati is also during these 12 years, we never pay any cent. Even we build a guest house, the cost of the guest house, of course, by the DRC, by us, the one that bore the cost, but also never pay any cent for rent. So this is very good. But communications and exchange of like information, as well as when we have meeting, for instance, next week in Yogyakarta about the symposium. We always invite our stakeholders, so the company always join us so they know what we are doing. And during the implementation of research, we have a clear communication system so that even we have the plots, our students, when going to the plots, we usually register. So we have a management system with the company. And in PT is one of the earliest restoration site in Indonesia. For that company, because this is a restoration area, we usually have an access benefit sharing project together with them. So means that when the PT would like to do capacity building in topic of the restorations workshop, usually that will be supported by effort. But supporting doesn't mean like it has to be related to cash money, but it also can be expert. So we also quite often share in that one. Bukit 12 as well, the same, the Taman Nasional, also selling, but we also put access benefit sharing fund to fund the staff to go for master. So one from Bukit 12 and one from the PT finish the masters that's supported by CRC. So fully funded until they finish. So we are more and for plots belong to farmers, smallholder farmers. We pay a kind of compensation because we disturb the work. But the farmers can work as usual as it is, so they can harvest, they can fertilizers, doing fertilizing, weeding, and what we do is only we control the timing. So we have to knock the timing and how much fertilizers they put and how much harvest they do. So for the research. So because we start some of the time, how to say that, the time that invest by the farmers. So we give some compensation, but this is not a huge amount, very low amount, I would say. So we never rent any single of the land during these 12 years. So, and this is a good practical management system because we are afraid if we pay and contract and the system, we will make the people dependent so much. And if there is another research groups are going to that village, perhaps this will be difficult because they already receive a quite high of money. That's why we are trying to avoid this. So we make it everything simple and reasonable, just because to avoid in the to create, how to say, the dependency to get some money later on. So jadi menghindari jangan sampai masyarakat itu tergantung ke kita. Jangan-jangan nanti peneliti lain yang nggak punya project nggak bisa meneliti kalau harus bayar. Tapi so far, 12 years are very successful with very little numbers. I would say for partner stakeholders, we did not have any problem, even with farmers. We are working with the permanent plots. The permanent plots are for 12 years and never have any complaint from farmers so far. Yeah, permanent. So CRC is a bit different from other projects which is moving around. We never move. We stay in the same plots. We stay with the same company, and we also for household, the social economy, we actually also stay with the same addresses. So same people, because what CRC doing is more like repeating because of the long-term transformation system. So thank you.
Thank you, Professor Scheu and Professor. To me, it seems more difficult than I expected. Actually, I was expecting that there will some kind of like high amount of compensations go to those stakeholders, but as you already explained, almost nothing. This is like they get benefits not directly from cash, but other benefits. And to me, it's very difficult. I don't know. Maybe if you want to have another project in other places, maybe well, Congratulations for this 12 years of work, so because it's very difficult. Yeah.
Which is not always happen to the
Yeah, that's true.
We have a very consistent and building the management system.
And that brings me also to another questions about the future. We're talking about the past, how you were convinced and established the plot, and about the future, because you said that the project is just this year. What will happen with all the infrastructures or the plots, permanent plots that you established there? Because to me, it's high level of investments in terms of maintaining resources, etc. And what will happen with that? Do you have any plan for the future after the project is finished?
Well, this is of course a matter of negotiations. The simple thing from the German side is that all what is installed here is staying in Indonesia. But how it's going to be kind of handed over, the joint management board in Indonesia has to decide about.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it's going to be a tough topic next in the symposium for the projects. But is there any other questions in the Zoom or maybe from the audience in here if you're interested with the text box? The text box, maybe in the chat room, or someone from the audience would like to, maybe they can ask questions directly, right? Just raise their hand or else. Yeah. It's very interesting topics, but maybe it's very too complicated for most of the audience. So, but yeah. Or I can add more question. Or Pana, maybe you want to add.
I mean, collaborations that really so huge that how manage and how manage the collaboration is not really easy, and also right now I think your questions that the big challenge for who I am from IPB, that how we like maintain this research. So unfortunately we just start next year or maybe of this year, and then nobody can even put this on, which is from the data already produced maybe positive things like publications and students and everything. I think that's maybe the options. I mean, maybe in the future that I am interested to invite us from the ecology. That would be very, very, very nice for us to like maybe since already have a part that for research, and also the data sharing is really looking very good. I think that's the opportunity. I don't know, maybe some of the research from our research center would be very interesting. I think we can discuss later and from Stefan for the future collaboration. I think that's also one reason why we sit together here right now. I think that's in my part.
Thank you, and to me, related to this oil computations and these issues, because it's very, in one side, it's interesting topics for scientists, but in other side, it's sensitive topics for the government, obviously. Yeah, because it's always like a sword that has to sharp edges, and sometimes it's very difficult. Do you have any like challenges related to that? Working with these topics in Indonesia for the field works, or really publishing the papers or else?
I mean, we are of course aware of the sensitive issues we were investigating from the beginning. And one of the commitments we also made from the beginning was that we stick to, on the project side, we really stick to basic research. So we're not kind of recommending anything in terms of policy implementations or things like that. But of course, some of the results, as also presented today, they do have some kind of policy implementations, which we hope will be taken up, and our counterparts are making action in that direction. So we do have, as I was also mentioning, a wide recognition of the results from stakeholders to even ministries. So there is recognition, and this may have implications. But this is outside of basically the goal of the project, I have to say. So this is basically your kind of duty.
Yeah. Or continue that.
Working on the oil topics, of course not easy because of the fact that like the Indonesians are the biggest producers as well as the biggest landscape perhaps as still till today. And there's always some there's also creating conflict sometimes with the oil palm industry, but so far no, how to say that, no harming to the project, never. And they are quite open. I mean that of course there are some complaints about the publications, but we also conduct kinds of meetings, and so there is no pressures like we have to alter or something like that. Of course, there is in particular on environmental issue, there is always some complaint. And on the other hand, I have a very good communications with the oil palm association, GAPKI, and all the others, Mama as well. But I have in the national levels are very well communication as well, working together, because I'm a part of the BPDPKS. So all the green members here who got a research for BPDPKS, one of the reviewer will be me. So I have quite good. That's why it's all with the partnership, or I mean that with a kinds of relationship, so that we can maintain a good collaboration as well. But we are very open, and CIC indeed are very different than others, because many others research project, managements only interested on the research activity, but in ours, we also doing a lot of capacity building for community as well. And we also doing a lot of workshops with different stakeholders in the government, but as well as even we are working together with Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Commerce. Yeah, so it's much depend on. I mean that the trick is actually mostly depend on how the Indonesian partners bring the project. So when we are good enough in the management system and having, I mean that because we are the one that know the local culture and the barriers and also the challenging, so we the one that has to solve the problem. Of course, this cannot be solved by our partner in Germany, in Göttingen, because they do not, how to say, experience or have not witnesses on the going on system in Indonesia. So that we are three parties in Indonesia, the IPP, Tadulako, and Jamia University are very good network, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Bambang Irawan from the Agriculture Faculty, University of Jambi. So, of course, we are really happy with the result of CRC after 20 years of really working together with all parties. And the result of CRC is not only, actually, if we see any problem of the completion, actually, we can answer 70 to 80% of the problem that we found based on our research. This is not only for the basic information regarding to the biodiversity, regarding to the, what is fertilizer, how nutrient is this behavior of the nutrient inside the soil, and also water contaminated. We have so many data about that. So if we come to the study, also learning about this disaster, it's really beneficial for the oil plantation actually. It is not only in the basic science, but also in the practical actually that one result of our CRC project already adopted by the Indonesian government. become the national policy. Then we call it Jangka Benar. I think all of you maybe, not all of you may be familiar with the project, this policy that actually the data, based on the data, that about 3 until 3.5 million hectares of the oil palm plantation is planted illegally inside the forest area. And the government already issued the policy that we call it Jangka Benar. To restore the oil palm plantation that planted inside the forest area into the close to nature, something like that. It's really close with our DE project. So this is one of the achievement of this year. Of course, we have so many achievements also. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak. Bu Ayan. Is there any questions? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, 3 years is the goal. Yeah, probably finding.
Not a CRC problem.
Mini CRC.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's think of the initiative from CRC. Because it's still in the very early stage.
Mama mentioned about beneficial of oil palms. You've thought since the beginning about the kind of ecological effects, impacts of conversions of forests to plantations, either it's rubber plantations or oil palm plantations. It increases primary productivities, leads to homogenizations of animals below ground. It sometimes also leads to heterogenizations of insects above ground. So it's interesting to me that we've already expected that the conversions or transforming from forests to other land systems that humans need, like agriculture, lead to negative impact. Is there any positive effect ecologically if these transformation systems happen? Do you see, or based on your data, is there any positive ecological positive effects of that?
Well, it's not that easy to answer, but the important thing, which also this meta-diversity perspective brings into, is that you need to consider larger spatial scales. So not only plot scale information is important to judge or to implement any also conservation strategies and so on, but you have to adopt really landscape scale perspectives. And from this perspective, conservation and kind of economic needs can be kind of more easily mediated, or the conflicts can be more easily solved. Because the landscape scale actually some transformation of rainforest, of course, will not too much affect biodiversity. We even see that in some of the groups, as you mentioned, they contribute to heterogenization, so they may also contribute actually to the landscape scale diversity, which is maybe, if you think about it from an ecological perspective, not too much surprising, but it has to be kind of stressed that it is a matter of perspective, you know, how to judge basically these transformation processes. So it's not entirely negative, but of course, if you consider the massiveness of the transformation as it is in the lowlands in Sumatra, well, it certainly had dramatic effects on biodiversity, so diversity of. But as Bamba was just mentioning, I think what from my perspective is that there now is also options to implement more landscape scale perspectives, and with that implement also kind of restoration projects. And with, from my perspective, also some scenarios which make sense is to restore, especially riparian sites, so along rivers and creeks and so on, which may function as corridors for animals across the landscape. And I think this makes perfectly also sense from the legal perspective. I think because there is legal restrictions to have oil palm plantations close to creeks and rivers. So I think what may happen in the next kind of decades is that there is a bit of swing back, and this may contribute to this kind of mitigation of conflict between economics, human welfare, and ecology.
Thank you for your explanations. The organizer actually gave me the time for this talk until 12:15, but because we start a bit too late, like 15 to 12, so it's okay that we finish by 12:30. So if there is no more questions from the audience in the Zoom or in here in the room, so I would like to finish today's expert talk from Professor Stefan Scheu from the University of Göttingen. So we learned a lot from you, but also thank you also for Professor Ayunchua, Bambang, Iskandar, and other colleagues here from three party of the University of Indonesia that give us a lot of nice, interesting perspective related to collaborations and examples of good practice of collaborations. Thank you very much for your talk and also for the insights to us. Thank you very much. Terima kasih Bapak Ibu yang ada di Zoom. Sampai ketemu kembali di expert talk berikutnya. Selamat siang. For the next, we have maybe photo sessions together. Is this okay?
Yeah, sure.
Together.